Marcus Johnson was a 34-year-old African-American single father living in a quiet neighborhood in Atlanta, Georgia. Since losing his wife to a sudden illness 4 years earlier, he had devoted every moment of his life to raising his 9-year-old son, Noah. Marcus worked long hours as a city bus mechanic, earning just enough to cover rent, food, and school expenses. Although money was always limited, their small home was filled with love, laughter, and respect. Marcus constantly reminded Noah that a person's true wealth was measured, not by money but by kindness, honesty, and the willingness to help someone when they needed it most. One freezing December evening, Marcus finished his late shift and drove home through the cold streets of Atlanta. Snowflakes drifted through the air as strong winds swept across the empty sidewalks. While waiting at a red light, he noticed an elderly man sitting alone at a nearly deserted bus stop. The stranger wore a worn-out gray coat, carried an old leather bag, and looked exhausted from the freezing weather. Marcus pulled over and asked whether the man needed help. The elderly stranger quietly explained that every nearby shelter was full and every hotel had turned him away because they believed he could not afford a room. Marcus hesitated for only a moment before making his decision. He knew inviting a stranger into his home carried risks, but leaving the elderly man outside in such dangerous weather felt impossible. After calling his neighbor to let them know he was bringing someone home, Marcus welcomed the stranger inside. Noah greeted the elderly man with a warm smile and offered him a hot bowl of homemade chicken soup. They shared a simple dinner together, talking about family, hard work, and second chances. The stranger listened carefully, impressed by the father's values and the young boy's generous heart despite their modest lifestyle. As the evening grew late, Marcus prepared the living room couch with clean blankets and a warm pillow. The elderly man thanked him repeatedly, saying that very few people would open their doors to someone they had never met. Marcus simply smiled and replied that everyone deserved compassion, especially during difficult times. Before turning off the lights, Noah wished the stranger good night and hoped tomorrow would bring him better luck. The elderly man looked around the humble home with grateful eyes before quietly whispering, "Kindness always finds its way back to those who give it freely." Early the next morning, Marcus woke to the sound of engines outside his house. Curious, he opened the front door and stopped in complete disbelief. 3 gleaming black Rolls-Royce Phantoms stood in front of his modest home while several men and women in elegant business suits waited respectfully beside them. The elderly stranger stepped outside, no longer wearing the old gray coat, but a perfectly tailored designer suit. One executive greeted him as Mr. Richard Kingston, the billionaire founder of one of America's largest real estate companies. Smiling warmly at Marcus, the billionaire said, "You gave me shelter when no one else would. Today I have come to repay your kindness in a way you will never forget." Marcus stood frozen on his front porch as neighbors quietly gathered to watch the extraordinary scene. The elderly stranger smiled warmly before introducing himself as Richard Kingston, the billionaire founder of Kingston Properties, one of the largest real estate companies in the United States. His executives explained that Mr. Kingston occasionally traveled without revealing his identity to experience how ordinary people treated strangers. During a sudden snowstorm, his driver had been separated from him after a vehicle breakdown, leaving him completely alone. While hotels and shelters turned him away, Marcus had welcomed him into his home without asking for anything in return. Richard invited Marcus and Noah into one of the luxurious Rolls-Royces for breakfast at his company's headquarters in downtown Atlanta. Although Marcus felt uncomfortable surrounded by such wealth, Richard insisted they were his honored guests. During breakfast, Richard listened carefully as Marcus shared his struggles of raising Noah alone after losing his wife. He admired the father's determination to remain honest despite financial hardships. Noah politely thanked Richard for visiting their home, making everyone smile. Richard quietly admitted that genuine kindness had become rare and that Marcus's compassion had restored his faith in humanity. After breakfast, Richard guided Marcus through the company's impressive headquarters. Employees greeted the billionaire with great respect while Marcus looked around in amazement. Inside a large conference room, Richard surprised everyone by announcing a new community initiative inspired by Marcus's actions. He then turned toward Marcus and offered him a leadership position as Director of Community Outreach, explaining that the role required someone who genuinely cared about people rather than profits alone. Marcus immediately questioned whether he was qualified, but Richard confidently replied that integrity, empathy, and character could never be taught in any university. Marcus accepted the opportunity after careful thought, promising to work as hard as he always had. Over the following months, he helped create housing programs for struggling families, emergency shelters during severe weather, and scholarships for children who had lost a parent. His honesty earned the respect of both executives and community leaders across Atlanta. Noah proudly watched his father become a role model for countless families. Newspapers shared Marcus's inspiring journey from an ordinary bus mechanic to a respected leader, reminding readers that one compassionate decision could completely transform a person's future in ways no one could ever predict. 1 year later, Richard visited Marcus's home again, but this time it was filled with celebration instead of uncertainty. Neighbors gathered for the opening of a new community center funded by Kingston, properties and dedicated to Marcus's late wife, whose memory had inspired his strength and kindness. Noah proudly cut the ribbon beside his father while children laughed around them. Richard smiled quietly, knowing that true greatness was not measured by wealth, but by the lives a person changed. As the sun set over Atlanta, Marcus realized that offering a stranger one safe night on his couch had created a lifetime of hope for countless others.